A 4-year-old beggar girl gets roughed up at the Greyhound bus station for trying to sleep on a bench, but a millionaire saw everything and something unexpected happens. Watch until the end. You won't regret it. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The weak crying echoed through the Chicago Greyhound station at 5 in the morning, blending with the noise of the buses and the movement of the first passengers of the day. Hazel, just 4 years old, was huddled on the cold metal bench, her clothes dirty and torn, contrasting with the bustling environment. Her auburn hair was tangled, and she held tightly to a piece of cardboard on which she had scribbled incomprehensible figures with a broken crayon. Hank Peterson, the 42-year-old night security guard, approached the girl with heavy steps. His eyes were bloodshot from the fatigue of a work shift that extended for 12 consecutive hours, 6 days a week. The accumulated irritation of years, dealing with homeless people and beggars, had hardened his heart. "Hey, kid, you can't stay here," Hank shouted, his rough voice echoing through the hall. "This ain't nobody's home. Get out of here before I call the cops." Hazel raised her big, frightened eyes, her tears leaving clean streaks on her dirty face. She didn't respond, just huddled even further on the bench, as if she could disappear between the slats of the metal. "Didn't you hear what I said?" Hank insisted, losing patience. He grabbed the girl's thin arm and pulled her roughly, causing her to stumble and fall on the cold floor. The cardboard with her drawings flew away, scattering across the wet floor. Of the bus station, Franklin Ainsworth, 58, had just gotten off an executive bus from Milwaukee, where he had visited one of his construction sites. Owner of Ainsworth Construction, a mid-sized company specializing in residential buildings, he was accustomed to solving complex problems with cold calculation. His graying hair was impeccably combed, and his dark suit demonstrated the financial success achieved over 3 decades of hard work. When he saw the scene, something inside Franklin stirred unexpectedly. He had spent the last 15 years building emotional walls after the traumatic end of his marriage, when his ex-wife, Patricia, discovered his constant infidelities and left, taking their daughter Chloe to New York. Since then, he had become a cold man, focused only on business and incapable of showing any kind of vulnerability. "What are you doing to that child?" Franklin asked, approaching Hank with natural authority. "She's a beggar, sir. She can't stay here bothering the passengers," the security guard replied, still holding Hazel's thin arm with unnecessary force. "Let her go," Franklin ordered, his voice low but full of authority. "Now." Hank hesitated for a moment, recognizing the posture of someone accustomed to being obeyed. He released Hazel, who immediately ran to pick up her drawings, scattered on the floor, her small hands trembling as she gathered the pieces of wet cardboard. Franklin crouched beside the girl, watching her desperate movements to save the drawings. There was something in that scene that touched a long-forgotten chord in his heart. Perhaps it was the way she protected those scribbles, as if they were treasures, or the silent determination in her small eyes. "What's your name?" Franklin asked softly. Hazel looked at him for a moment, her big eyes studying the man's face. She didn't answer, just continued gathering her drawings with meticulous care. "She doesn't talk," Hank commented, still irritated. "She's been here for 3 days, just making noise and bothering everyone. I've already called Child Protective Services twice, but they said they don't have room." Franklin felt a pang of something he hadn't experienced in years: genuine compassion. Looking at Hazel, he saw reflections of his own daughter Chloe, at the same age, before his mistakes destroyed his family. The girl had the same determined expression, the same way of furrowing her brow when concentrated. "Come with me," Franklin said to Hazel, extending his hand. "You can't stay here." To his surprise, the girl hesitated only for a moment before accepting his hand. Her small, cold fingers closed around his, and Franklin felt a responsibility that he had long forgotten. How to bear, During the drive to his mansion on the outskirts of Chicago, Hazel remained silent in the back seat of his black Mercedes. She held her drawings against her chest and watched the scenery through the window with an expression that mixed fear and curiosity. Franklin watched her in the rearview mirror, questioning the impulse that had led him to make that decision. Franklin's mansion was in a gated community, a modern two-story construction surrounded by manicured gardens. When they arrived, Hope Sullivan, 45, came out to greet them with an expression of evident surprise. She had worked for Franklin for 15 years since his divorce and knew her boss's solitary habits well. Hope's dark hair was always tied in a discreet bun, and she wore simple but impeccable uniforms. Her brown eyes were kind, but carried a deep sadness. She had left her 2 children, Marcus and Luna, with her mother in rural Wisconsin when they were 8 and 10 years old, respectively. The need to work to support the family after her husband left had forced her to sacrifice motherhood for financial survival. "Mr. Ainsworth, who is this little girl?" Hope asked, immediately noticing the precarious state of Hazel's clothes. "She's going to stay with us for a few days," Franklin replied, surprising himself with the decision. "Prepare the upstairs guest room and see if we have suitable clothes for her." Hope observed Hazel with maternal attention. The girl stayed close to Franklin, but her big eyes examined every detail of the house with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. There was something in the child's posture that awakened all the protective instincts that Hope had been forced to suppress for years. "Of course, sir. I'll prepare everything," Hope said, already moving towards the stairs, "and perhaps a warm bath and a proper meal." When they were alone in the entrance hall, Franklin crouched again beside Hazel. The girl watched him with an intensity that was disturbing for someone so small, as if she were trying to decipher his intentions. "You're safe here," he said softly. "No one will hurt you." It was then that Hazel did something unexpected. She extended one of her crumpled drawings to Franklin, the figure of a crying woman, scribbled with childish strokes but laden with an emotion that made the man's heart clench. In the corner of the paper, there were scribbled numbers that made no sense. 2479. Franklin took the drawing carefully, as if it was something precious. At that moment, he realized that his life had changed irreversibly. The mysterious girl he had found at the bus station carried secrets that he did not yet understand, but something inside him knew that protecting her had become his new mission in life. The first 3 days with Hazel in the mansion were a disconcerting experience for Franklin. The girl refused to speak, communicating only through timid gestures and glances that seemed to carry secrets too profound for her age. Hope had managed to give her a bath and change her dirty clothes for children's dresses that she bought urgently. But Hazel continued drawing obsessively on any paper she found. During the mornings, Franklin watched discreetly while the girl sat in the corner of the room, always creating the same figures: crying women, houses with closed windows, and curiously, white vans drawn with nervous strokes. The numbers also appeared constantly, always the same sequence, 2479, sometimes accompanied by other sets that Franklin could not decipher. Hope had taken care of Hazel with a dedication that surprised even herself. For the first time in 15 years, she felt she was exercising the motherhood she had been forced to abandon. She prepared special meals, trying to find out what the girl liked to eat, and hummed lullabies that her own mother had taught her years ago. "She has nightmares every night," Hope reported to Franklin on a Thursday morning. "She shouts things I can't understand, and then wakes up crying. Yesterday she said a word that worried me." "What word?" Franklin asked, setting aside his breakfast. "Sapphire. She repeated that name several times, as if she were calling someone," Hope explained, drying her hands on her apron. "And there's one more strange thing, Mr. Ainsworth. Yesterday, when a white van passed on the street, she hid under the kitchen table and didn't want to come out for 2 hours. The revelation about Hazel's reaction to white vans left Franklin deeply disturbed. He had built his fortune by developing a sharp instinct for identifying problems, and all the signs indicated that the girl had experienced significant trauma. He decided it was time to seek professional help. Dr. Miles Carter, a 52-year-old pediatrician, practiced at a private clinic in downtown Chicago. He had lost his own daughter, Sophia, 5 years ago in circumstances he preferred not to recall, and since then had dedicated himself obsessively to work as a way to deal with the pain. When Franklin called requesting an urgent appointment for a child in a delicate situation, something in the businessman's voice caught his attention. The appointment was scheduled for Friday afternoon. Franklin explained the situation in summary, omitting only the fact that he had found Hazel abandoned at the bus station. For Dr. Carter, she was a distant relative who had been under his care temporarily. Dr. Carter examined Hazel with meticulous care, immediately noting signs that worried him deeply. The girl was malnourished, had small but multiple scars on her arms and legs, and exhibited behaviors typical of children who had suffered severe trauma. When he approached too quickly, she shrank back. When he raised his voice, even minimally, she trembled. "Mr. Ainsworth, I need to talk to you in private," Dr. Carter said after finishing the examination. In the office, away from Hazel, the doctor got straight to the point. "This child has been systematically abused. The marks I saw are not domestic accidents or simple neglect. Someone hurt this girl deliberately and repeatedly." Franklin felt his blood run cold. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely, and there's more. Her behavior suggests that she was kept in confined spaces for prolonged periods. The way she moves, always checking the exits, the way she shrinks when she hears loud noises. These are classic signs," Dr. Carter explained, his eyes showing personal pain. "Mr. Ainsworth, how exactly did this child come to you?" Franklin hesitated for a moment before deciding to confide in the doctor. He told the whole truth about the encounter at the bus station, the strange drawings, and Hazel's peculiar behaviors. Dr. Carter listened in silence, his expression becoming increasingly grave. "I need to document all of this," the doctor said, finally. "Not out of legal obligation, but because I've seen similar cases. This girl may have escaped something very serious." That night, Franklin couldn't sleep. He walked through the house until he found Hazel in the kitchen, sitting on the floor and drawing in the moonlight streaming through the window. She had scribbled new numbers, 4712, and next to them, a figure that appeared to be a house with many small windows. "Hazel," he said softly, crouching beside her, "can you show me where this place is?" To his surprise, the girl looked him directly in the eyes for the first time since she arrived. Then, with her weak and hoarse little voice, she spoke the first complete sentence since her arrival. "Sapphire is there, Sapphire is waiting." The revelation left Franklin completely bewildered. Who was Sapphire, and where was there? He looked at the drawing more carefully and realized that the numbers were not random. They seemed to be coordinates or addresses. The drawn house had specific characteristics, many small windows, a high fence, and something that looked like a water tower in the background. The next morning, Franklin made a decision that would change everything. He hired a private investigator, Rick Sanders, 48, a former police detective who had opened his own agency after retiring early due to disagreements with the department. Rick was known for his discretion and efficiency in sensitive cases. "I need you to find information about a missing child named Hazel and any reference to someone named Sapphire," Franklin explained during the meeting at Rick's office. "I have reason to believe they are connected to some kind of irregular situation involving children." Rick took detailed notes and asked for photos of Hazel, as well as copies of the drawings she had made. "These numbers she draws could be rural, Addresses. In the state's interior, many properties use their own numbering systems, the investigator observed. While Rick began his investigation, the routine at the mansion continued. Hope had noticed that Hazel was beginning to open up gradually, especially during meals. The girl demonstrated a constant hunger, as if she feared the food might disappear at any moment, and always saved pieces of bread in her pockets. "She's starting to trust us," Hope commented to Franklin. "Yesterday, she let me brush her hair without crying. And this morning, when I was singing while cooking, she tried to follow the melody." It was during one of these moments of apparent normality that the first real twist happened. Franklin was in his office when his phone rang. The number was unknown, and the voice on the other end was rough and threatening. "We know you have the girl," the male voice said. "She doesn't belong to you. Return the merchandise, or there will be consequences." "Who are you? What do you want?" Franklin asked, feeling his heart race. "You have 48 hours to leave the girl where you found her. Don't make things difficult for yourself, Mr. Ainsworth. We know where you live. We know your routine. Don't test our patience." The call ended, leaving Franklin in shock. Someone knew about Hazel, knew where he lived, and was directly threatening him. The girl had really escaped something terrible, and now they wanted her back. Franklin ran to the kitchen, where he found Hazel and Hope baking cookies. The normality of the scene contrasted sharply with the terror that had taken over him. Looking at the girl, who was smiling shyly while mixing the dough, he realized that protecting her had become the most important thing in his life. "Hope, I need to talk to you urgently," he said, trying to keep his voice calm so as not to scare Hazel. That night, after explaining the situation to Hope, Franklin took security measures. He installed additional cameras, reinforced the locks, and hired a security guard to watch the property. But the question that tormented him was, how long could he protect Hazel before those responsible for her suffering came looking for her? The 48 hours mentioned in the threatening call passed in constant tension. Franklin had redoubled the security of the mansion, but knew he couldn't live indefinitely as a prisoner in his own house. Hazel seemed to sense the change in the environment, becoming more withdrawn and returning to hiding whenever she heard external noises. Rick Sanders called on Tuesday morning with information that changed everything. "I found something, Franklin. The numbers the girl draws correspond to rural addresses in the Rockford area. Specifically, I found references to a property registered as St. Teresa's Home, supposedly an orphanage, but it doesn't appear in any official state records." "An unregistered orphanage?" Franklin asked, feeling his stomach clench. "Worse than that, I talked to some contacts in the area, and there are rumors about missing children connected to this property. Nothing official, but whispers. And there's more. I found records of a woman named Sapphire Oliver, 28, who worked there as a caregiver until disappearing about 2 months ago." The revelation about Sapphire made Franklin immediately remember Hazel's nightmares and how she called out that name during the nights. "Were you able to locate this Sapphire?" "I'm still looking, but I have some leads. I'm checking boarding houses and shelters in the city center. If she fled from the same place as the girl, she's probably hiding somewhere nearby." After the call, Franklin went to Hazel's room, where he found her drawing compulsively. This time, she had created something different, a female figure next to a child, both running. On the paper, it was written in childish letters, "Sapphire and me." "Hazel," he said softly, sitting next to the girl, "did Sapphire help you get out of that place?" The girl stopped drawing and looked at him with her big, expressive eyes. Then, for the second time since arriving, she spoke. "Sapphire told me to run when the car stopped. She said she was going to meet me later, but she didn't come." Hazel's words revealed a story of planned escape, where Sapphire had sacrificed her own safety to ensure the girl escaped. Franklin felt immense admiration for this woman he had never met, but who had risked everything to save a child. That afternoon, Rick called again with urgent news. I found Sapphire. She's in a boarding house downtown. But Franklin, the situation is complicated. She's very sick and afraid. When I mentioned Hazel's name, she panicked. Sick how? Severe malnutrition, injuries that haven't been treated properly. It seems she suffered as much as the children she was trying to protect, Rick explained. She's at the Hope Inn on Main Street, room 207. But Franklin, she's terrified. She doesn't want to talk to anyone. Franklin made an impulsive decision. I'm going there now. Hazel needs to know that Sapphire is okay, and Sapphire needs to know that the girl is safe. The Hope Inn was an old and poorly maintained building in downtown Chicago, frequented by people in desperate situations. Franklin climbed the creaking stairs to the second floor, feeling the smell of damp and neglect that permeated the environment. When he knocked on the door of room 207, he heard a weak and frightened voice. Who is it? My name is Franklin Ainsworth. I'm taking care of Hazel. She's safe. The silence that followed was long and tense. Finally, the door opened slowly, revealing a woman who had clearly gone through terrible ordeals. Sapphire Oliver had a thin and marked face, unkempt auburn hair, and eyes that showed a deep weariness. Her clothes were simple and worn, and she moved carefully like someone who still felt physical pain. Hazel, is she really okay? Sapphire asked, her words laden with desperate hope. She's safe in my house. She says your name every night. She needs you very much, Franklin replied, watching Sapphire's face light up with relief. Sapphire began to cry, tears that seemed to carry months of tension and fear. I thought they had found her. I thought everything had been in vain. Tell me what happened, Franklin asked, entering the small and precarious room. During the next hour, Sapphire revealed a story that deeply shocked Franklin. St. Teresa's home was a facade for a child exploitation operation where orphan or abandoned children were kept in terrible conditions. Sapphire had been hired as a caregiver, but soon discovered the true nature of the place. The children were forced to work from a very young age. Those who didn't obey were severely punished. Hazel was special to them because she was small and docile, Sapphire explained, her voice trembling. I tried to protect her as much as I could, but I knew we needed to escape. How did you manage to escape? I planned for months. I taught Hazel simple codes through the drawings, showed her how to get to the city if anything went wrong. When the opportunity arose during a transport, I told her to run and not stop. I was going to follow her, but they caught me first. Sapphire showed scars on her wrists and arms, evidence of the punishment she had suffered for trying to help Hazel escape. I only managed to escape 2 weeks later, but when I got to the bus station, she wasn't there anymore. Franklin explained how he had found Hazel and how she was gradually recovering. He offered to take Sapphire to his house immediately, but she hesitated. They're still looking for us. If they find me with Hazel, Sapphire began. We've already received threats. They know where she is, Franklin interrupted, but together we can protect her better. And she needs you, Sapphire. You're the only family she knows. That night, Sapphire arrived at Franklin's mansion. The reunion between her and Hazel was one of the most emotional moments that Hope had ever witnessed. The girl ran into Sapphire's arms, and both cried embraced for long minutes without letting go. I told you I was going to find you, Sapphire whispered, kissing Hazel's forehead. I'm never going to leave you again. But the joy of the reunion was interrupted the next morning when Franklin received a devastating call from his accountant. Ainsworth Construction was being investigated for tax irregularities that had suddenly appeared in the records. Surprise audits were being conducted, and his main contracts were being questioned. I don't understand, Mr. Ainsworth, the accountant said, clearly disturbed. Yesterday, everything was normal, and today discrepancies have appeared that never existed. It's as if someone has altered our records on purpose. Franklin immediately understood what was happening. The threats hadn't been empty. They were attacking his company as retaliation for protecting Hazel. His financial stability, built over decades, was being systematically destroyed. During an emergency meeting with his lawyers, Franklin discovered the extent of the problem. 3 of his largest contracts had been abruptly cancelled. Long-time clients were refusing to renew agreements, and rumors about tax irregularities were spreading rapidly through the construction industry. "You could face bankruptcy if this continues," his lead attorney warned. "There are ways to minimize the damage, but it would be necessary to make some concessions." Franklin knew exactly what concessions were being suggested, and the answer was clear. He would never hand over Hazel to save his business. For the first time in his life, something was more important than money. That night, as he watched Hazel and Sapphire playing together in the living room, Franklin realized that he had found something he didn't know he was looking for: a family. Hope also watched the scene with tears in her eyes, remembering her own children, whom she hadn't seen in so long. But the tranquility was again interrupted when Dr. Carter called with disturbing information. "Franklin, I need to tell you something. I've been documenting Hazel's case discreetly, and I've discovered that other doctors in the area have treated children with similar injuries in recent years. Always isolated cases, always without follow-up." "What does this mean?" "It means that the place she came from may have affected dozens of children. And if Sapphire has information about the location and operation of this operation, she can help save them," the doctor explained. "But it also means you're in real danger. People who profit from child suffering won't hesitate to use violence to protect their interests." Dr. Carter's revelation placed Franklin before an impossible choice: keep Hazel and Sapphire hidden safely, or use the information Sapphire possessed to potentially save other children, but exposing them all to enormous risks. As the typical Chicago winter rain began to fall on the mansion, Franklin looked out the window and wondered how far he was willing to go to protect his new family. The war against those who had hurt Hazel was just beginning, and he still didn't know the real price he would have to pay. Franklin's decision came during a rainy August dawn, when he found Hazel and Sapphire in the room, both awake and whispering about other children who had stayed at St. Teresa's home. The girl was holding a new drawing, this time showing several children behind bars with heartbreaking, sad expressions. "There's a girl named Anna who cried every night," Hazel told Sapphire, "and the boy, Peter, who couldn't walk straight because they hurt his leg." Sapphire squeezed Hazel's small hand, her own tears falling silently. "I know, honey. I remember them too." It was at that moment that Franklin realized that he couldn't live in peace knowing that other children continued to suffer. His company was almost in ruins, but for the first time in decades, he had found a purpose greater than profit. The next morning, he gathered Dr. Carter, Rick Sanders, and the 2 women in his office. "We're going to report everything. Sapphire has enough information to locate the place and identify those responsible. I can no longer pretend this isn't my problem." Dr. Carter leaned forward, his expression serious. "Franklin, this will expose all of you. Once the authorities get involved, there will be no way to hide." "We're already exposed," Franklin replied. "They're destroying my company and will continue to pursue us. The only way to end this is to report the entire operation." Sapphire, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "I kept evidence. During the months I worked there, I hid documents, wrote down names, photographed injuries on the children when I could. It's all hidden in a place that only Hazel knows." All attention turned to the girl, who held Sapphire's hand tightly. "Can you show us where it is, Hazel?" Franklin asked gently. The girl nodded shyly. "Sapphire taught me to hide important things under the big tree in the backyard of the bad place. But it has to be at night when the bad men are sleeping." Rick Sanders took over the coordination of the operation. As a former police detective, he knew the necessary procedures and had contacts in the relevant authorities. "I'll contact District Attorney Lucas Andrews. He specializes in crimes against children and will take this seriously. But before they could act, the situation became drastically complicated. On Thursday afternoon, Hope answered a call that changed everything. It was Luna, her 25-year-old daughter, calling after 2 years of no contact. "Mom, Marcus and I are coming to Chicago," Luna said, her voice filled with emotion. "Grandma told us you're taking care of a child. We want to meet her and we want you back in our lives." Hope leaned against the kitchen wall, her legs trembling. For 15 years, she had sacrificed closeness with her children to work and support the family. Now, seeing the love she dedicated to Hazel, they understood that she had always been a loving mother, only forced by difficult circumstances. "You really want to see me?" Hope asked, crying. "Of course, Mom. We understand now why you had to leave, and we want to be part of the life of this girl who brought you back to us." The arrival of Marcus, 27, and Luna on Saturday was a deeply emotional moment of reconciliation. They hugged Hope for long minutes, asking forgiveness for the years of resentment. When they met Hazel, they immediately accepted her as part of the extended family. "This girl saved our mother," Marcus told Franklin. "For the first time in years, she's truly happy." But the happiness was interrupted when Rick Sanders brought alarming news. "I managed to locate the property where St. Teresa's home was, but there's a problem. The place was hastily abandoned 2 weeks ago. It seems they knew they were being investigated and transferred everything." "And the children?" Sapphire asked, desperate. "They disappeared along with those responsible, but I found clues that they may have moved to another state. Possibly Wisconsin," Rick explained. The revelation that the children had been transferred devastated Sapphire. She entered a crisis of guilt, feeling that she had failed them again. Hazel, realizing her protector's suffering, did something surprising. She drew a new picture showing Sapphire as a heroine saving a child, with the phrase written in crooked letters, "Sapphire is good." It was then that Dr. Carter revealed information that would change everything. "I have something to confess. During all these months, I've been documenting Hazel's case and sending discreet reports to the relevant authorities." "What do you mean?" Franklin asked, surprised. "I lost my daughter Sophia in similar circumstances 5 years ago. She was kidnapped by a similar network, and I never managed to find her. When I saw Hazel, I knew I couldn't let the opportunity to obtain justice pass," the doctor explained, his voice trembling. "District Attorney Lucas Andrews already has a complete dossier on the case." The revelation that Dr. Carter had been secretly working with the authorities initially irritated Franklin, but he soon understood that the doctor was fighting for the same cause as they were. The following week, District Attorney Lucas Andrews visited the mansion personally. He was a 45-year-old man dedicated to justice for vulnerable children. He listened attentively to Sapphire's account and examined all the evidence she had collected. "With this information, I can issue search warrants in 3 different states," the prosecutor said. "But I'll need both of your testimonies in court." Sapphire agreed immediately, but Hazel's situation was more delicate. As a minor and a victim, her testimony would need to be carefully conducted. Over the following months, life in the mansion gradually transformed. Franklin faced the bankruptcy of his company, but found that it didn't devastate him as he had expected. With the money he managed to save, he opened a smaller construction company, focused on social projects. The biggest twist came when the authorities finally located the new headquarters of the criminal operation in Madison, Wisconsin. During a coordinated operation between 3 states, 17 children were rescued, including Anna and Peter, about whom Hazel had spoken. Sapphire was present during the rescue, helping to identify and calm the traumatized children. Seeing Anna and Peter again was a moment of redemption that healed her from much of her guilt. But the true transformation came when Franklin formalized the adoption of Hazel after an 8-month process. Sapphire became her shared guardian, creating a non-conventional but deeply loving family. The adoption ceremony was simple, held at the courthouse with the presence of Hope, Marcus, Luna, and Dr. Carter. When the judge asked Hazel if she wanted Franklin to be her father, she replied in her clear voice, "He's already my heart daddy." Hope, who had reunited with her children through the love she had dedicated to Hazel, decided to continue working at the mansion, but now as part of the extended family. Marcus and Luna moved to Chicago, creating a support network that naturally included Hazel as an adopted granddaughter. Dr. Carter, who had found purpose in helping Hazel, began working voluntarily with children rescued from similar situations. Although he never found his daughter Sophia, he discovered a way to honor her memory by helping other children. Sapphire enrolled in a child psychology course, determined to become a trained professional to help traumatized children. Her own experience made her especially qualified for this work. 2 years later, Franklin's mansion had become a home full of life. Hazel, now 6 years old, attended a private school where she excelled in drawing and mathematics. She still drew, but now her figures showed happy families, houses with gardens, and birds flying free. On a spring afternoon, while watching Hazel, playing in the backyard with Hope's grandchildren who came to visit on weekends, Franklin reflected on how his life had completely changed. He had lost his millionaire company, but gained something infinitely more valuable: a family based on true love, not on obligations or convenience. Sapphire had become like a daughter to him. Hope was the mother his house had always needed, and Hazel was the light that illuminated every day. "Daddy Franklin!" Hazel shouted from the backyard, running into his arms as she did every afternoon when he arrived home from work at the new construction company. "Look at the drawing I made today." The drawing showed a large house with many open windows, colorful gardens, and a large family smiling. In the corner, she had written in her childish handwriting, "My happy family." Hugging Hazel, Franklin understood that sometimes the best stories start in the most unlikely places and turn into homes filled with true love. The girl he had found, abandoned at the bus station, had not only found a family, she had created one, bringing together wounded people and transforming them into something beautiful and lasting. That night, while tucking Hazel into bed, she asked, "Daddy, do you think other boys and girls will find families like ours?" "I'm sure they will, my daughter," Franklin replied, kissing her forehead. "And do you know why? Because there are good people in the world, like Sapphire, who are always ready to help." Hazel smiled and closed her eyes, safe in the love of a family that had chosen to love her unconditionally. Outside, Sapphire finished her studies at the kitchen table, preparing to help other children find their own families. The mansion that had once been just an empty house was now full of hope, proving that true love always finds a way to flourish, even in the most wounded hearts. If you liked this wonderful story, please comment. Your opinion is very important, and if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.